This lecture is in commemoration of the Platinum Jubilee of Her Majesty the Queen. The New Atlantis by Lord Bacon. With the passing of time, things forgotten or neglected come back into focus. And I think this is especially the case in the example set in the field of learning by Sir Francis Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon, Lord Verulam, Vice-Chancellor Albans, High Chancellor of England, was one of the universal geniuses of all times. I suppose it could be listed in the same classification as Leonardo da Vinci, who took all knowledge at his province. Lord Bacon's position in learning is unique, for in his personality and in his skills, he made possible with his own nature to achieve a unification of knowledge, which is very seldom to be found in any one personality. Lord Bacon's area of skills included, first of all, the legal profession. In this, he went to the highest possible office, next only to the king in power. As High Chancellor and as legislator, he was the outstanding genius of his time. Scarcely less important were his advancements in learning. He was probably the father of modern science, and his entire approach towards knowledge was highly scientific. He recognized the fallacies in the academic traditions of his time and laid the foundation of what we call the inductive system of reasoning. Under inductive reasoning, science rules from a pitiful background to one of the most powerful positions in the world today. Scarcely less important were his contributions in philosophy. He was a philosopher of great parts, a person whose intellectual skills enabled him to integrate most of the great philosophical systems that have preceded him. He was not only a powerful Western thinker, but in the large number of his specialized philosophical researches, he seems to have instinctively fallen into considerable parts of Buddhistic and African philosophies, although he probably did not know it. Next in importance, of course, was his literary output. He was a writer of extraordinary genius. His essays, written when he was a young man, are still considered to be one of the perfect examples of English literature. With an immense vocabulary and a wonderful power of turning a well-meditated and well-considered thoughts, in his field of literature, he was a poet. He also transcribed and poetized a number of the Psalms of David. It is believed on pretty firm foundation that he was also the final editor of the King James Version of the Bible. In addition to these numerous and highly diversified accomplishments on intellectual and material levels, he was a devoutly religious man. His prayers were simple, humble, and magnificent expressions of an indwelling presence of the divine in his own daily life. His secretary and chaplain, Dr. Rowley, said of him, "If ever the light of God descended upon any man in this century, it was upon his lordship. For although he was a great reader of books, his knowledge came not from books, but from some deep hidden source within himself." In light of Lord Verulam's illustrious background, with reference to the concepts of New Atlantis, we have to place this type of thinking within some type of historical reference stream. We cannot estimate a work of the 17th century by the concepts of our own time. We must consider it in the background and conditions which released it, and the pressures which brought it forth into objectivity. In the early years of the 17th century, an extraordinary phenomenon burst upon Europe. That phenomenon was the Society of the Rosy Cross. This is probably one of the great mysteries of literature, and perhaps one of the great mysteries of history. This society issued a series of proclamations, or the most famous of these manifestos announced a reformation of Europe, a universal reformation, in fact, a major change in the thought and life of mankind. That such works could come into existence meant that already what we call the Reformation had accomplished the large part of his labor. Man's mind was liberated from the tremendous orthodoxy that dominated the medieval world. At the same time, a series of rather brilliant intellectuals was experimenting at the fringe of what we call today philosophical humanism. We are aware that the modern trends in humanism may be very materialistic, but such was not the original trend in the hands of these men, most of whom were sincere and devout, God-loving human beings. Humanism to them meant the beginning of the recognition of human dignity, that the individual was important. We were told that in the so-called medieval period, that the individual simply did not exist. But we understand today by humanitarianism that no real equivalent in those times, that each individual struggling for his own survival advanced his destiny regardless of the cost to other individuals. The tyranny of success was probably more severe then than it begins to appear today. That is to be severe in the immediate future of our own time. Everything was sacrificed to a tremendous pressure for power. When humanism began to break through this barrier, its primary interest was in the dignity of man himself.